February 26, 1916, 0510, trench line east of Bras-sur-Meuse. Corporal Léon Garnier leans into a narrow loophole cut through a thick steel plate. He waits for a flicker of movement along the frost-white lip of a German sap. A single shot cracks from the darkness. The plate bucks. A bright puncture blooms where there was none. His cheek burns. The slug, a hard-cored 7.92 millimeters, tunnels through the shield, clips the rear rim of his Adrian helmet and ricochets into the clay. He drops, stunned, helmet ringing like a bell. One shield, one rifle, one bullet that was not supposed to pass. Verdun will last 300 days. It will eat men, stone, and iron. It will count its tempo not in advances but in crates of ammunition, tens of millions of shells hurled across a front only a few kilometers wide, and in the steady, mechanical passing of trucks on a single lifeline road where, every handful of seconds, another load of supplies grinds forward. Yet the morning that plate fails, the war suddenly feels smaller again. A rifle muzzle somewhere out there, a man behind it, and a new kind of bullet that changes what safety means. The foreshadow arrives in steel. The loophole is no longer safe. By February 21, 1916, the first hour of the German assault has already shown what modern logistics can do to living ground. A barrage so dense it seems continuous, pressure applied at the exact ribs of the French defensive system. The heights astride the Meuse, Côte 304, Morhum, the approaches to Fort Douaumont. Erich von Falkenhayn does not promise a sweep to Paris. He promises erosion, grind the French army until it cannot stand. Crown Prince Wilhelm's Fifth Army carries out the plan. Its infantry move through a storm of iron designed to carve trenches and nerves at the same time. Across the lines, General Philippe Pétain takes a different promise and enforces it with rhythms and roads. Rotate divisions before they shatter. Feed them by the Voie Sacrée, the sacred road, kept open by a perpetual convoy. He will move men through Verdun like blood through a heart, out before necrosis, in before collapse. Order against attrition, system against entropy. Inside that system are the habits that have kept men alive since 1914. Keep the head down. Trust the steel plate at the firing step. Use the periscope. Believe the thin brim of Adrian steel will turn fragments that knives the sky in every shell burst. The French frontline kit reflects a narrow edge of safety, a helmet meant to stop shrapnel, loopholed shields to stare without being stared at, and the comfort of thickness you can touch. And then the bullets change the rules. French poilus call them perforants. The Germans call them hardcore ball. The idea is simple and terrible. Take a 7.92 millimeter Spitzer, give it a dense, hardened heart, and fire it at the exact objects that had become ritual protections. Loophole plates, periscope housings, the thin armor around observation slits, even the thicker shields that machine gun crews drag up at night. At short ranges across no man's land, 50 meters, 100, 200, these rounds smash through the idea of cover as surely as they smash through steel. In a battle where the most precious commodity is a safe inch of space, an inch is taken away. The numbers will tell one story. The faces will tell another. Morning of February 25th, 1916. The French 51st Infantry Regiment has come up through the Moulins sector toward Fort Douaumont, its file swinging past felled timber and brick powder. A machine gun section plants a heavy shield at the lip of a crater. They bolt it into clay, angle the slit, set the arc. A minute later, the right visor in the embrasure bursts inward. The crew drags the gun down. The shield that was supposed to keep muzzle fire out becomes a source of splinters and flakes. Not wood, not rock, but steel that cut faces and eyes. The gun team learns the new rule. Steel fails with violence. Elsewhere along the line, snipers change targets. The old contest, spot the flash, wait for a cap edge, aim for the cheekbone, shifts to a duel with devices. Periscopes, a flick of glass, a few degrees of tilt. German marksmen first shatter them with ordinary rounds, then punch through the armored sleeves that the French have clamped over the periscope tubes. The periscope is no longer a way to rise above the trench without dying. It becomes an antenna that draws fire. The periscope dies. The man who lent it his eye comes back at half height for the rest of his tour. By March, word spreads the way new physics always spreads at the front, in rumor that hardens into procedure. Do not trust the plate. Angle it more. Double it if you can. Sandbags in front of steel. The angle matters. A perpendicular plate invites penetration. A sloped one can force a glance. Men who never spoke of ballistics now speak of angles of incidence. Platoons redesign their loopholes with the urgency of engineers in a storm. They cut the slits narrower and replace straight slots with staggered, offset apertures. Every change trades visibility for survival, because visibility has been demoted. It is no longer seeing that saves you. It is not being seen behind flawed matter. The Adrian helmet remains on every head, blue-gray, stamped steel, a crest along its spine. It saves lives every hour of every day, not by stopping bullets, but by denying fragments their easy path. But a myth grows up around it in quieter sectors. It took a bullet. He lived. At Verdun, those myths are stripped. Rifle fire at close range does not play by the helmet's rules. French stretcher-bearers record the pattern in their books. Shallow scalp bruises from ricochets, deep, fatal perforations from direct hits at 30 meters. Embrittled steel plates that spall and throw dust as dangerous as gravel. One lieutenant points to a helmet that looks intact until he tilts it, and the light finds the cave-in above the ear. A line forms at the depot for replacement helmets, not because the old ones fell apart, but because trust did. Watch as the lines tighten. Watch as the bullets do not just wound bodies, they wound the logic of the trench. The first German gains come fast. Herbebois, Haumont, Samonieux, their names burning through French communiques. The ace is Douaumont, the largest of Verdun's forts, captured on February 25th by a mixture of audacity and accident. Now the fight tilts around its ramparts and casemates, while French units cling to a series of forward positions whose maps change daily. The ground has fewer trees, fewer houses, fewer landmarks each week, but the steel has more agency. Machine guns stretch bullets like wire. The hard-cored rounds become a local solution to local problems. Knock out a loophole, silence a gun, flush a lookout, scrape a trench of its peering heads. It is not glorious. It is repetitive, technical, and precise. It is not the new big weapon. It is the tightening of small tools. Note the inputs. A front of perhaps 15 kilometers. Divisions rotated in and out, brigades that dissolve and are rebuilt. Tons of ammunition that can be measured by the hour. Note the outputs. A shell-swept ridge held by the width of a man's shoulders. A fort retaken, then threatened, then retaken again. The ledger has as many rows as a warehouse inventory, and the same obsession with counts. In that ledger, bullets with hardened cores are a line item that seems trivial until you tally their effect. The steady reduction of places where a man feels safe enough to look. By April, the duel shifts to the left bank of the Meuse. Morthum and Côte 304 become synonyms for effort poured into mud. The German machine now tries to unhinge the French defense by taking away the vantage points that make the right bank survivable. The French resist because they must. If the left bank crumples, the whole Verdun position becomes a depression to be shelled at will. Again, the fight resolves to a few hundred meters where each crater edge, each trench lip, each loophole is the difference between information and blindness. Again, German snipers and machine gunners reach for rounds that neutralize devices. The adaptation cascades. French infantry learn to treat steel as a base layer, not a wall. They stack sandbags in front of loophole plates to absorb and disrupt. They hang spare coats, sacks of earth, broken planks. They work at night with shovels and at dawn with caution. They train new men with instruction that sounds religious. Do not trust the plate, do not trust the crest, do not trust the glass. Trust distance, trust obscurity. Trust the curve in the trench that hides you from a straight line of sight. Pétain's larger system absorbs this lesson and standardizes it. Manuals are updated. Company talks repeat the mantras. The general's obsession with method, artillery and counter-battery, infantry kept rotating, road traffic scheduled to the minute, finds a smaller echo at the firing step where procedure becomes survival. Meanwhile, Robert Nivelle's counterattacks retake Vaux village and positions north of Fort Douaumont at painful cost. The famous phrase, "on les aura," becomes a slogan for persistence, not speed. It sits oddly alongside the private geometry lesson taught by bullets that pierce steel. One is morale, the other is mechanics. Both are needed. Neither can replace the other. Consider a specific morning on the slopes of Morthum in May. The 129th Infantry has been up 2 nights. The men have learned which German saplines send flares fastest when French machine guns chatter, a crude timing test they call the light clock. A corporal with a periscope peeks and counts heartbeat seconds. Before he reaches 5, the armored sleeve on his tube shivers. A hard-cored round drills through the sleeve, through the periscope head, and into the earth behind him. He knows the shot came from less than 100 meters, judged by sound and delay, and he knows it would have gone through his faceplate if he had been using the loophole. He does not step up again. He becomes a believer. Now zoom out from the periscope and the loophole to the fort. Fort Vaux, June 1916. Underground passages hyperventilate with fighting, grenade blasts ricocheting inside thick masonry, water running out, men moving by candle. Outside, the German infantry invests the caponiers and the roofs. Through crenelles, through slits, through any aperture, they fire. Rounds punch through thin metal shutters and chew at the edges of thicker ones. The language of the siege shifts, not just the weight of artillery and the thickness of concrete, but the physics of small holes and the bullets driven at them. Captain Reynal holds out until he cannot. His garrison surrenders not to shells, but to thirst and suffocation. Yet through and after the siege, men tell stories of bullets that made a door of a slit. The macabre detail sticks. A shutter was closed. A bullet made a new opening where none should exist. The numbers told a different story. That familiar line, usually reserved for casualty charts and the output of factories, now applies to material science at the front. The muzzle energy of a 7.92 mm at close range, the structure of steel plates cut and stamped in depots, the brittle behavior of thin armor struck at right angles, these are numbers that translate to eye injuries, to dead machine gunners, to blind sectors where no one is willing to look. The German solution is cheap compared to artillery and strategic compared to chance. It costs metallurgy, not millions of francs, and it spreads through a battlefield faster than a new doctrine because the adoption point is a man and a trigger, not an army and a plan. What happened next made the pattern obvious. The French began to reply with thickness and shape. Where they could, they replaced flat loophole plates with heavier, sloped constructions. They nested shields like scales. They trained periscope operators to keep the device in motion, to avoid being predictably still. They learned to let machines do the looking. Mirror tricks, pipes, angled glass, anything that separated the human eye from the aperture itself. And they shifted the balance of reconnaissance to patrols at night and before dawn. If the daylight belonged to bullets that read steel like paper, the twilight belonged to men who moved quietly. By the high summer of Verdun, a second truth arrived that widened the shock of the first. The hard-cored bullet was not just a tool against plates. In volume, from machine guns and concentrated rifle fire, it could saw at the edges of armored positions and even worry the thinner plates shielding the sides of fixed guns. A fortress casemate designed to resist artillery still had joints and seams. Small arms with the right ammunition could find them. The effect was not to collapse masonry, shells did that, but to deny gunners the delicate work of aiming under pressure. A gun that cannot look cannot aim. A gun that cannot aim is reduced to noise. The soldiers' words for this were practical and immediate. The plate is dead. The slit is death. Look from below, not through. The psychological effect mattered as much as the physical. Each man carried into the trench a mental map where certain objects were safe. The new bullets erased icons on that map and did it in ways that felt personal. A single hole where there had been a promise. A single chip that turned to shrapnel and took an eye. The ordinary round was already terrifying. The hard-cored round attacked trust. The mystery at the center of this transformation, what exactly had changed and when, does not resolve to a single factory or a single date. It resolves to a competition between metallurgy and field improvisation that accelerated in the winter and spring of 1916 and spread under the spotlight of Verdun. German arsenals had hardened core rounds before tanks ever appeared. They were designed to defeat shields, loophole plates, and embrasures. Verdun made them urgent. Frontline reports from German marksmen describe purpose, not novelty. Use hardcore for plates. French reports describe surprise turning into procedure. Do not trust plates under close fire. The bullets were not science fiction. They were the industrialization of a simple idea. The reveal, mid-battle, is not that a magic bullet exists. It is that safety is a system, and the system had quietly depended on assumptions about material behavior that the enemy could cheaply overturn. Early scenes, men bracing behind loopholes, smiling at the notion that a rifle could not possibly push through, are reframed. The locus of control shifts from the individual soldier's caution to the factory and the lab where the core of a bullet is chosen and heat-treated. Cover ceases to be a universal category and becomes a variable. Thickness, angle, distance, core composition. The battlefield turns from topography to geometry to metallurgy in a near-seamless slide. Before Verdun, a platoon might call a plate good. After, they speak in gradients. Good at 100 meters against ordinary ball, bad if the shooter is closer, worse if he has hard core, acceptable if angled, unacceptable if flat. The vocabulary of survival gets decimal. This change closes an open loop that ran from the first week of the battle. In those early days, French frontline units kept reporting uncanny shots through shutters, through plates, through the lips of machine gun embrasures, and chalked them up to luck or to picked men with exceptional rifles. Slowly, the tally of coincidences grew too large to be coincidence. The day a single bullet punched through Garnier's plate above Bras is no longer a freak event. It is predictable, replicable, explainable, a combination of distance, core, angle. The shock remains, but now it has a name and a cause. That knowledge will not save everyone. It will save some. The thesis, compressed to a single line, is this. At Verdun, German steel-cored 7.92mm rounds systematically erased a category of perceived safety, forcing the French to replace faith in objects with method in behavior. The consequences traveled far beyond one battle. Once soldiers on both sides accept that small arms can defeat light armor and loopholes at short range, the logic of observation and fire changes across the Western Front. Sniper duels become device duels. Periscopes acquire sacrificial heads. Shields grow heavier and sloped. Trenches curve more aggressively. Look becomes a scheduled act, done for seconds at a time after a coordinated distraction. Infantry manuals standardize this dance. The improvisation of one sector becomes the doctrine of many, and the arms race continues. In late 1916 and 1917, as tanks appear elsewhere, the hardened core round shifts target from shield to plate, from plate to moving armor. What began as a sniper's trick at a loophole becomes a general answer to steel. Each innovation carves a new pattern in the great machine of attrition. More time in dugouts, more reliance on indirect fire, more night work, tighter control of exposure. Each defensive reaction increases the premium on information gathered safely and decreases the time men spend looking in daylight. War thickens, both literally and procedurally. At Verdun specifically, the story ends in December of 1916, with the French recapturing Fort Douaumont and Fort Vaux in a series of carefully choreographed assaults that showcase combined arms and method. Pétain's discipline and Nivelle's momentum, however debated later, produce an outcome that matters to France. The sacred city holds. The casualty bill is catastrophic, the landscape permanent scarred, the forts less fortresses than symbols. But along the line, the small things that changed in the spring remain changed in winter. No platoon commander tells his men to trust a flat plate against close rifle fire. No periscope operator lingers. No machine gun team treats its embrasure as a rosy frame on a world outside. When veterans speak later, some into notebooks, some around cafe tables, some not at all, their accounts gravitate to two kinds of memories: the scale of bombardment and the intimacy of tiny defeats. The shells never stopped, and the bullets learned to read steel. A sergeant remembers the sound when a hard-cored round struck a plate and did not penetrate, a high, glassy ping, followed by a hiss of flakes. He remembers what a true penetration sounded like, a sharper crack, an ugly inhale from the men behind the plate, and then the sudden, indecent hole. He says the sound taught him faster than any order what to do. Move. Always move. Never assume the second shot will miss what the first marked. Take one more micro to macro step. The French Army's material response at the production level shows a recognition of the changed game. Procurement of heavier shields, experiments with body armor plates to protect sentries at exposed posts, emphasis on fieldcraft that reduces linear exposures. Even the shape of the helmet evolves in later models with attention to thickness and distribution to better cope with the worst fragment storms. The lesson radiates outward, aligned design with the likely threat, not the hoped-for one. By the autumn, as the battle burns on with lower intensity but no less stubbornness, the hard-cored 7.92mm round has lost its novelty but not its effect. It becomes background physics, like gravity or mud. It is factored in, planned around, seldom discussed unless it appears in the worst way, through a hole where no hole should be. Meanwhile, artillery continues its arithmetic of hecatombs. Logistics continues its treadmill along the Voie Sacrée. Infantry leadership continues its rotation schedule to keep the nerve from snapping. The big machines remain big, but along the firing step, the small machine, a rifle with a bullet whose heart is different, keeps revising the minute-to-minute calculus of survival. One last vignette from December, after the French recapture Douaumont. The trench is quieter than it was in spring, but any quiet at Verdun is contingent. A private sets a new loophole plate, heavier this time, angled back. He eyeballs the slope, braces it with a sandbag, and chalks a small mark where he plans to watch. The sergeant who learned the sound of true penetration stands behind him. He speaks a single sentence that compresses a year of learning. Look fast, then move. The private nods. He looks. He moves. No bullet comes. The discipline remains. Return now to the image of Corporal Garnier on February 26. The ricochet, the ringing helmet, the shocked face bent over a plate that was supposed to be inviolable. Contrast it with a late-year firing step, where no one believes in inviolable, they believe in practices. Not courage over fear, but procedure over belief. Not thicker faith, but smarter angles. This is Verdun's true education in miniature, the hardening not of steel, but of method. In wars of machines, the smallest change in material can force the largest change in behavior. At Verdun, a hard-cored bullet took away a ritual object, the safe slit, and replaced it with a discipline. Men adjusted. They made their peace with less seeing and more surviving. They learned that safety is not given by things, but earned by systems, roads that feed, rotations that rest, angles that glance, seconds that you budget. The road still moves. The trucks still pass. The forts still stand, more symbol than shield. The plates along the trenches are thicker than they were in February, and they are angled now, and there are sandbags in front of them. Yet every man who lived through Verdun carries inside him the note struck by the first time a bullet made a door where none should be. He knows what objects can and cannot promise. He knows that at this battle, in this year, metallurgy reached into the trench and rewrote the rules, not with a roar, but with a single piercing crack and a hole the size of a small coin that opened into an abyss. He looks, fast, he moves, and he lives by that line.